The day my daughter told me not to come to her wedding, I didn't argue. I just stood there holding the invitation I paid for. Music drifted from the garden, laughter spilled through the open gates, but her eyes were cold, sharp, unrecognizing. Ava, my only child. The same little girl who once called me her hero now looked at me like a stain she wanted to hide. "Please, Dad," she said quietly, "you'll ruin it." I didn't speak. There are moments when words are useless, when silence is the only thing strong enough to keep a man upright. I turned the envelope in my hands. Inside, it was a photo of her late mother Margaret smiling on her wedding day. I had promised to be there for every milestone of Ava's life. I built her a home, paid her tuition, and gave up sleep comfort and the gold watch my father left me. But that afternoon, standing behind those white roses and fake smiles, I realized she was ashamed of everything that built her. I didn't shout. I didn't plead. I simply stepped back and let the door close. Because some lessons aren't taught with anger, they're taught with absence. As I walked away, the music behind me grew louder, but the ground beneath that house was already shifting. No one knew it yet, but the floor beneath her perfect ceremony would soon no longer be hers. My name is Edward Cole, but most people just call me Ed. I raised my daughter Ava alone after her mother Margaret passed away. Our house stood at the edge of town, small, old, nothing impressive, but it carried every memory we ever had. I built it myself, board by board, on a piece of land I could barely afford. Every nail I hammered into those walls was a promise that Ava would never go without. For 38 years, I worked at the steel factory. The sound of machines was my morning, and the ache in my hands was my night. I used to come home covered in dust, bones heavy, but my heart lightened when I saw her asleep on the couch, textbooks open, the TV humming softly beside her. I'd cover her with my old Marine blanket and sit there watching her sleep. That rhythm of her breathing reminded me why I worked myself to the edge. There were winters when I patched the roof alone at midnight. Summers when the air smelled of rust and roses, the same ones Margaret had planted before she got sick. I kept those flowers alive because they were all Ava had left of her mother. I sold my father's gold watch to pay for Ava's college admission. It was the only thing he ever left me, but when I saw her crying with joy that day, saying, "Dad, you're my hero," I knew it was worth it. Years passed. Ava graduated, got a job in the city, and for a while she called every Sunday. I'd sit by the phone waiting for her voice, but time has a way of stealing things quietly. The calls grew shorter, then stopped altogether. Holidays turned silent. I'd cook enough for two, hoping maybe she'd show up, but all I ever heard was the ticking of the clock and the hum of an empty house. Still, I kept her room untouched, her photos, her books, even the worn-out stuffed bear she refused to throw away. Then came Ethan Carter, the man who would become her husband. He was polite, charming, too polished for someone raised on real work. The first time I met him, I saw the distance grow between Ava and me. His family came from money, the kind that makes people forget where they came from. When they visited, Ava's laugh sounded forced, her words chosen too carefully. I saw her glance at my rough hands, my faded shirt, and I caught something in her eyes I'd never seen before: embarrassment. I didn't blame her. I blamed the world for teaching her that love needed polish. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering if I had worked my whole life to become something she needed to hide. A week later she called. Her voice was soft but distant, rehearsed like a speech. "Dad," she said, "you've done everything for me, but maybe it's better if you don't come to the wedding. The guests are different." I remember gripping the phone so tight my knuckles turned white. I looked at the photo of Margaret on the shelf, her smile frozen in time. I wanted to fight back, to tell her that love isn't something you schedule by class or wealth, but I didn't. I just said, "All right, sweetheart, whatever makes you happy." After I hung up, the silence in the house felt heavier than the walls. I walked from room to room, touching the furniture, tracing the scars of years gone by: the kitchen table where Ava did her homework, the porch where Margaret sang softly on summer evenings, the stairs where Ava once tripped and laughed through tears. Every corner whispered a memory. But that night, those memories felt like strangers. I didn't sleep. I sat by the window until dawn, watching the rain slide down the glass. Each drop felt like a reminder that love, when taken for granted, turns into something colder than hate. Still, I refused to resent her. Fathers don't stop loving, they just learn to love quietly. I prepared a small gift, a letter and a photo of her with her mother tied with a white ribbon. I didn't want to interrupt her joy. I only wanted to see her smile from afar. When the morning of her wedding came, I put on my old gray suit, the same one I wore to her graduation. I looked at myself in the mirror, wrinkled scars, and the eyes of a man who had built his entire world around one person. Outside, the sun was bright, but inside, everything felt like dusk. I told myself I would stay far away, just close enough to see her walk down the aisle, just close enough to say goodbye in silence. But life doesn't honor quiet hearts. I stood by the gate, clutching the envelope with trembling hands. When Ava saw me, her smile vanished. The music stopped. The guest turned. Her voice, sharp and cold, cut through the air. I told him not to come. The laughter around me died. I tried to speak, to tell her I only came to bless her from a distance, but my voice failed me. I just stood there watching her turn away, pretending I wasn't even real. And in that moment, I realized something cruel but clear. Sometimes love doesn't fade. It gets erased. When I walked away from that gate, I didn't cry. I didn't shout. The laughter from behind me faded into the wind while my footsteps dragged the weight of a lifetime. By the time I reached home, the house didn't feel like home anymore. I sat in the dark, surrounded by old photographs, Ava's first school play, her graduation, Margaret holding her as a baby. Every picture that once gave me purpose now felt like proof that I had been replaced. Outside, rain tapped against the window, like quiet applause for my foolishness. Somewhere across town, my daughter was smiling for the cameras, her world bright, her heart untouchable. But the silence in my house was heavier than any storm. It pressed on my chest until breathing felt like work. The walls that once echoed with laughter now whispered only one truth: I had been erased from my own story. The next morning, the air felt different, still sharp, honest. I made black coffee and walked through the rooms, touching the furniture I had built with my hands. The dining table still bore the burn mark from the night Ava spilled soup. The stair railing still carried a dent from when she dragged her bike upstairs. Those marks were once memories. Now they were scars that refused to heal. I stood by the window and looked across the street. The same house I built 40 years ago was glowing with music and lights. The same walls that once protected her now sheltered my humiliation. And that was when the clarity came, quiet, cold, and absolute. Love had blinded me. I had given so much that she forgot who it all came from. I walked to my desk and opened the drawer that held my life bills, letters, and a thin folder labeled Property Deed. I pulled it out and felt the roughness of the paper beneath my fingertips. My name, Edward Cole, was still there, faded but unbroken. Every inch of that land, every nail, every board still legally belonged to me. She might have changed her last name, but she hadn't changed the truth written in ink. For the first time in years, I smiled, not out of joy, but out of understanding. She had taken my silence for surrender, but silence, when chosen, is never weakness. It's a weapon sharpened by patience. That night I didn't eat. I didn't sleep. I just sat at the kitchen table, the deed spread before me, and made a decision. I wasn't going to fight her. I wasn't going to beg for respect. I was simply going to take back what was mine. At sunrise, I called my old lawyer, Robert Lawson. He had handled the purchase decades ago when Margaret and I first bought the land. His voice cracked with age, but he still remembered me. "Ed," he said, "it's been a while." "What's going on?" I told him I wanted to sell the house. There was a pause long enough to carry understanding. "Are you sure?" he asked. "Yes," I said quietly. "Completely." Later that day, I drove into town. The streets were half empty, lined with the ghosts of old memories. The bakery where I used to buy Ava's favorite muffins, the park where she learned to ride her bike, the store where Margaret used to laugh too loud while picking paint colors. Every corner of that drive was a farewell. When I pulled up outside Robert's office, the sky had turned gray, and the smell of rain filled the air. Inside, the office smelled like dust and coffee. Robert greeted me with a small nod and gestured toward the papers on his desk. He reviewed the old deed, looked up at me, and said softly, "You still own it, Ed. All of it." I nodded once. "Then let's make it official." He adjusted his glasses, hesitated, as if waiting for me to change my mind, then began typing. The soft click of each key echoed like nails being hammered into a coffin. Not a coffin for her, but for the version of me that had begged to be loved. When I signed the listing papers, my hands didn't tremble. Each stroke of my pen felt deliberate, final. Robert looked at me for a long moment and said, "You're a good man, Ed. Don't let this make you bitter. I smiled faintly. It won't, I said. Bitterness is for people still waiting for apologies. By the time I left, the rain had stopped. The air was cool, calm. I passed the old diner on the corner and stepped inside. The waitress, Linda, smiled when she saw me. Rough day, she asked. I shook my head. No, actually, it's been a good one. She didn't understand, but she smiled anyway. Not everyone has to understand peace when it finally comes. I drove home slowly. The town looked the same, but felt lighter, as if something inside me had already let go. Across the street, the lights from Ava's wedding still glowed. I imagined her dancing under the chandeliers I had installed, smiling for photos, beside people who whispered my name in mockery. And I realized something profound: I didn't need to be there to be present. My work was in every brick, every beam, every breath of that house, and soon none of it would belong to her. That night I sat on the porch with a cup of black coffee. The papers lay on the table beside me, still damp from the lawyer's ink. Above me, the sky stretched wide and empty. For the first time in decades, my heart felt the same way, empty but free. The next morning, Robert called. His tone carried quiet satisfaction. We found a buyer, he said. A man named Benjamin Whitaker. He's offering full price and wants to close immediately. I didn't hesitate. Accept it, I said. Sell it. By noon, the documents were finalized. By evening, the home that had defined my life was no longer mine. Yet strangely, I didn't feel loss, only release. Every drop of sweat, every calloused hand, every sleepless night had led to this quiet reclamation of dignity. I wasn't taking revenge. I was reclaiming peace. As I stepped outside into the cool air, I looked across the street one last time. The windows of the old house glowed in gold, filled with people who thought they were celebrating their future. None of them knew that the foundation beneath their feet no longer belonged to them, that the roof over their heads now belonged to a man who had already let go. I stood there in the middle of the street, the night breeze brushing my face, and smiled not out of triumph, but out of stillness. For years, I gave everything away in the name of love. Tonight, I finally kept something for myself, my silence, my dignity, and the power of walking away without a sound. The following days moved like slow rain on glass, steady, soundless, unstoppable. I didn't tell anyone what I'd done. Not Robert, not Linda, and certainly not Ava. I woke early, made coffee, read the paper, and carried on like any other man living alone. But beneath that calm surface, a quiet storm was already turning. Each morning, I checked the mailbox for updates from Robert. Each afternoon, I walked past the window to make sure the house across the street still stood where I left it. It looked the same, perfect, golden, and unaware. People passed by and complimented its beauty, never realizing that the heart of it had already changed hands. By the third day, the transaction was complete. Robert called to confirm that the funds had cleared and the deed had been legally transferred to Benjamin Whitaker. I thanked him, hung up, and stared at the phone for a long time. The silence that followed felt sacred. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with the new documents spread out before me. My old signature beside Benjamin's, the notary stamp, the crisp seal of finality pressed into paper. It was done. The home Margaret and I built, the one Ava had turned into a stage for her pride, now belonged to someone else. I didn't feel guilt, only peace. People talk about revenge like it's a fire, but they're wrong. Real revenge is cold. It doesn't burn, it cleans. For the next week, I lived quietly. Every morning, I'd step onto the porch with my coffee and watch the sunrise spill over the house across the street. Sometimes I'd see workers going in and out, clearing decorations from the wedding. Other times I'd see Ava's car parked outside her and Ethan carrying boxes, laughing like nothing had changed. But I knew. The papers knew. The world simply hadn't caught up yet. On the seventh night, it rained again. Heavy, endless rain that washed the world clean. I sat by the window watching the lights flicker across the road. Around midnight, headlights cut through the storm. A dark car pulled up to the gate. Two men stepped out, Mr. Whitaker and his lawyer, Mr. Sloan. They carried a briefcase and a folder. I didn't need to hear the words to know the scene. I had written it days ago with my own hand. I could see them through the rain-calm professional. They spoke with the guard, then walked to the door. Inside, I saw movement, shadows turning people confused. Ethan appeared first, smiling politely, as if greeting strangers. Then I watched that smile dissolve as he read the papers. He called for Ava. She appeared a moment later, still in her wedding dress. The white fabric shimmered under the porch light, her face pale, her expression twisting between disbelief and fear. She laughed nervously, thinking it was a mistake. There must be some confusion, I could almost hear her say. But the men didn't waver. The law doesn't care about emotion. The signatures were real. The transfer was complete. The laughter from inside turned to whispers. The guests began to leave quietly, unsure of what they were witnessing. Ethan looked at her differently now, his pride cracking, his patience thinning. The house that had symbolized her perfection was gone, sold beneath her feet. Within minutes, the police arrived, not for a fight, but for protocol. Officer Bennett and Officer Price stepped out, their flashlights cutting through the storm. They weren't there to arrest anyone. They were there to ensure an orderly handover. The house no longer belonged to the bride and groom. It belonged to Benjamin Whitaker. From across the street, I sat perfectly still. No satisfaction, no applause, just stillness. She had told me I'd ruin her day if I came to the wedding. Maybe she was right. I ruined it without even being there. Ava stepped outside barefoot, her makeup running in black streaks down her cheeks. She clutched the bottom of her dress, shivering under the rain. Around her, the remnants of the celebration, melted flower streamers, laughter all dissolving into mud. She looked around, searching for something, maybe someone to blame. And then her eyes met mine. Through the curtain of rain across the distance, our eyes locked. She froze. In that second, she understood everything. The silence between us wasn't distance anymore. It was judgment. She had humiliated me in front of strangers. Now life had returned the favor perfectly quietly. I didn't move. I didn't wave. I just sat there watching her crumble in the same doorway where she once said, "You'll ruin it." The officers spoke gently, asking her to step aside so they could close the gate. The last thing I saw before they shut it was her face, a mixture of disbelief and regret. Then the lights went out. The laughter, the music, the arrogance, all gone. The house was empty again. The next morning, the town buzzed with rumors. The bride lost her house on her wedding night, someone said at the bakery. Her father sold it while she was saying her vows. Another whispered at the gas station. I didn't correct them. Let them talk. Stories travel faster than truth, but eventually they meet. My phone rang over and over that day. Ava's name flashed on the screen again and again. I didn't answer. She left voicemails first, angry, then pleading. "Dad, please call me back," she said in one. "We can fix this," she begged in another. "But some things aren't broken, they're finished." Then Ethan called. His voice was colder, steadier. He said he understood why I did it, but asked if there was any way to reverse it. I told him calmly, no. The sale is final. The papers are sealed. There was a long silence on the line before he hung up. That was the last time I ever heard his voice. By the end of the week, the Whitakers had moved in. A kind couple with 2 children, Noah and Sophie. They waved whenever they saw me, unaware of the story buried beneath their new home. To them, it was just a house. To me, it was freedom. Ava, I heard, had moved into a small apartment in the city. The marriage didn't last long. Pride rarely does. One evening, her car pulled up outside. She didn't knock. She sat there for almost an hour, crying quietly behind the wheel. Her shoulders shook, but she never looked toward me. I watched from the porch, motionless. Sometimes silence teaches better than words. When she finally drove away, I didn't feel anger. I felt release. Now every morning I sit on my porch and listen to the laughter of the Whitaker children playing in the yard across the street. The sound doesn't hurt, it heals. The house no longer belongs to my past, it belongs to their future. And that somehow feels right. Ava once told me I'd ruin her wedding, but in truth, I only gave her what she needed, most a lesson. That respect cannot be bought with shame, and that love, when dishonored, learns to walk away in silence. The morning after the storm, the world felt strangely quiet. Rain had washed the streets clean, leaving puddles that mirrored a gray sky. Birds sang somewhere in the distance, their voices small and hesitant, as if even they were unsure how to fill the silence left behind. I stepped onto the porch with my coffee steam curling into the cool air. Across the street, the house looked different now, not because its shape had changed, but because its meaning had. The front yard was a battlefield of wilted flowers and torn ribbons. The porch where laughter had once spilled out like music now stood empty, a hollow monument to what pride had destroyed. I sat down and watched quietly. Every corner of that place held ghosts, my wife's voice, my daughter's laughter, my own footsteps from years ago. But those ghosts no longer hurt me. They simply existed like memories finally at peace. By noon I could hear whispers from down the street. Neighbors talking in hushed tones, trading fragments of the story. Did you hear the bride lost her house on her wedding night? Her father sold it out from under her. Some said it with shock, others with admiration, but none of them truly understood. It wasn't vengeance. It was truth finding its way home. That afternoon, my phone rang again. Ava's name flashed across the screen. I didn't answer. She called 3 times, then stopped. Later came the voicemails. The first was confused, "Dad, I don't understand what happened." The second was furious. "How could you do this to me?" The third was soft, almost breaking. "Please call me back. We can fix this." But some lessons don't come with second chances. When love turns to entitlement, when gratitude turns into embarrassment, there is no fixing, only learning. So I deleted her messages one by one, and the silence that followed felt like the closing of a wound. Days passed and the story spread. In small towns, rumors move faster than wind. By the end of the week, everyone knew. Some said I was cruel. Others called me brave. But I didn't care for either. The truth doesn't need applause, and dignity doesn't need defense. The new owners, the Whitakers, had moved in by then. A humble family with kind eyes and quiet manners. They waved each morning when they saw me, and sometimes I waved back. Their children, Noah and Sophie, played in the yard, their laughter ringing through the air like forgiveness. It didn't sting, it healed. The sound of their joy filled a space that had been empty for years. One evening just before sunset, Ava came. Her car stopped in front of my house, engine idling for a while. I didn't move. I stayed seated on the porch, hands wrapped around my mug as if it were holding the last bit of warmth in the world. She didn't knock. She didn't call out. She just sat there, shoulders trembling, head bowed. Even from a distance, I could see that pride had left her. What remained was something softer, guilt maybe, or understanding. For a long time, she stayed like that. Then she started the car and drove away. I watched her taillights fade into the dusk until the road was empty again. I could have called after her. I could have stopped her. But some truths have to echo inside a person before they can be heard. That night, I slept without dreams for the first time in years. Weeks passed. The Whitakers planted new flowers in the garden. They painted the fence, fixed the mailbox, and filled the house with the kind of laughter that used to belong to us. I watched them every evening, and instead of envy, I felt gratitude. That house was no longer a reminder of loss. It was proof that love could be reborn, that what pride ruins, humility can rebuild. I often thought about Ava, not with anger, but with a quiet hope. I wondered if she'd learned what I had. That respect can't be begged for. That love isn't something you inherit. It's something you earn again and again. One morning as autumn began to touch the trees, I found a letter in my mailbox. No return address, but I knew the handwriting instantly. It was Ava's. The envelope was thin, and when I opened it, a single page slipped out. She wrote that she finally understood that everything she'd built had stood on foundations she never acknowledged. She said she was sorry for forgetting where she came from, for turning shame into distance, for loving the world more than the hands that shaped it. And at the bottom, in small, shaky letters, she wrote, "You were right to sell it. It was never mine to begin with." I read the letter 3 times. The words blurred through my tears, not tears of grief, but of release. After all these years, I had been seen not as a burden, not as an embarrassment, but as a father. I didn't write back. There was nothing left to say. Forgiveness had already happened in the silence. That night, I slept deeper than I had in decades. The house around me hummed softly, as if peace itself had finally decided to stay. From then on, my days were simple. I tended my garden, fixed broken tools, and watched the Whitaker children play in the fading light. Sometimes I'd hear a wedding song drift from somewhere far away, and instead of pain, I felt gratitude. Not every story of loss is a tragedy. Some are beginnings written in quieter ink. Ava lost a house, but she found the truth. I lost a daughter for a while, but I found myself again. I was the man who built everything with his hands, and she was the daughter who once tried to erase me with words. But time has a strange way of teaching what pride refuses to learn. You can't build happiness on the ruins of love you disrespected. Now every morning I pour 2 cups of coffee, one for me, one for memory. The second cup always goes cold, but I keep it there just the same. Because some love doesn't disappear. It just changes shape from holding on to letting go. The years that followed didn't rush. They moved the way old rivers move steady, quiet, carving truth into everything they touched. The noise of the scandal faded long ago, swallowed by time and gossip that no one remembers clearly anymore. What remained was stillness, not the empty kind, but the kind that hums softly like the last note of a song that refuses to die. The Whitakers still live across the street. Every Saturday morning I watch Benjamin mowing the lawn, while his wife Elena tends to her flowers. Their children Noah and Sophie run through the yard chasing bubbles and laughter. The same yard where my daughter once played, the same earth that still carries my fingerprints beneath its roots. And sometimes when the wind blows just right, I can almost smell Margaret's roses again. It doesn't hurt anymore. I don't flinch when I see those walls painted a different color, or the porch lights glowing at night. The house isn't mine, and that's all right. What I built has found purpose again. That's more than enough for an old man. Every morning I wake up before the sun. The habit never left me. I make my coffee 1 cup, black 1 cup, untouched. I set the second cup across from me like I used to when Margaret was alive, or when Ava still visited. The steam curls into the quiet, then fades. I don't pour it out. I let it cool. It's not grief anymore. It's memory made visible. Sometimes the mail brings me letters from Ava. They come irregularly, months apart, written in careful, almost childlike handwriting. She doesn't ask for forgiveness anymore. She doesn't promise to visit. She just writes about life, how she works in the city, how she volunteers at a shelter now, how she planted roses on her apartment balcony because they remind me of Mom. I always read them twice, then placed them in a box beside Margaret's old photo. I never write back, but I think she knows I read them. Silence, when shared, becomes a language of its own. There are days when I sit on the porch at sunset and the light turns everything gold, the street, the windows, the edges of the world. In those moments, I feel Margaret beside me. I imagine her voice saying, "You did what you had to do, Ed. You kept your dignity." And maybe that's all life ever asks of us, to keep what's true even when love forgets to. I've stopped trying to measure time in years. I measure it in peace, in mornings that don't ache, in nights that don't replay old words, in the sound of children laughing across the street, in the rhythm of my own heartbeat still reminding me, I'm here. Sometimes when the wind dies down, I think of that day, the wedding, the rain, her eyes meeting mine across the street. For a long time, that memory carried pain. Now it carries symmetry. She learned pride's cost. I learned silence's worth. We both paid, and somehow we both survived. Love didn't end that day. It just changed its shape. It became quieter, more honest, stripped of its illusions. That's what real love does. It outlasts everything but ego. Once pride is gone, all that's left is truth. In town, people still nod to me with a kind of respect they didn't show before. They think what I did was revenge. It wasn't. Revenge wants recognition. Peace doesn't. What I did wasn't about winning. It was about remembering that the man who builds doesn't need applause from those who live off his work. I still walk by the house sometimes. The fence is new. The windows shine. The laughter inside is warm. The world kept turning, and I let it. One evening, Noah waved at me through the fence holding a small wooden toy truck. "My dad said you built this house," he shouted. I smiled and nodded. "Yes, son," I said softly. "A long time ago." Then he grinned and ran off, and that was enough. I went home that night lighter than I'd felt in years. I sat by the window with my coffee, the second cup cooling beside it. The sky outside was turning violet. Somewhere a song drifted faintly from a neighbor's radio, a love song, simple and old. I listened, closed my eyes, and for a moment everything felt whole again. Ava's last letter came in spring. It was short, only 4 sentences. She wrote, "I've learned that love without respect dies quietly. I hope you're proud of me now, Dad. I'm planting new roots. I think I finally understand you." I folded that letter carefully and placed it with the rest. I didn't cry this time. Some stories don't end with tears. They end with peace. When people ask what happened to my daughter, I say, she grew up. When they ask about the house, I say, it found better hands. And when they ask about me, I just smile and say I'm still here. Because that's the truth. I am still here not as the man who was humiliated, but as the man who learned that silence is sometimes the loudest answer. Every life leaves behind something. Some leave legacies of noise, others leave echoes of wisdom. Mine will be the latter. And when my time comes, I hope the world remembers me not as the man who sold his daughter's house, but as the father who taught her through quiet consequence that love built on respect lasts longer than pride built on show. As the sun dips below the horizon, I take one last sip of my coffee and look across the street. The lights flicker on, laughter spills through open windows, and somewhere inside that sound, I hear Margaret's voice, Ava's childhood giggle, and the heartbeat of a home reborn. I smile to myself. The silence has done its work, and for the first time in a long time, it feels like peace has come home. There's a quiet that only comes after you've lost everything you were willing to fight for. It doesn't hurt anymore. It just settles inside you like old light. I used to think love meant giving until there was nothing left of me. Now I know real love means knowing when to stop giving to those who only take. I walk slower these days. My knees ache, my hands tremble, but my heart feels lighter than it did when I was young. Maybe that's what wisdom really is, the weight that once crushed you, turning into something you can finally carry. Every morning I stand on the porch with my coffee and look at that house across the street. The laughter, the warm light, the sound of children chasing each other, it fills the air like a hymn. That place isn't mine anymore, but it still carries my fingerprints, and maybe that's enough. Maybe that's all any of us can hope for, to leave behind something that outlives our pain. Sometimes I still imagine Ava standing at that gate looking at me the way she once did, ashamed, proud, confused. But in that same vision, I see her older now, wiser with her mother's eyes and a heart finally softened by time. She doesn't say sorry anymore, and I don't need her to. Regret has a way of teaching lessons that apologies can't reach. I used to believe silence was loneliness, but now I understand its power. The kind of power that doesn't break things, it restores them. Silence doesn't scream for revenge. It simply allows truth to reveal itself when the noise is gone. There's an old saying Margaret used to whisper when life was hard. Peace doesn't mean nothing happens. It means nothing owns you anymore. For years, I didn't understand what she meant. I do now. Nothing owns me, not loss, not pride, not the love that once turned its back. The world outside keeps changing. Seasons come and go, and the flowers in the Whitaker's garden bloom brighter every year. Sometimes the kids bring me cookies or ask about the tools in my shed. They call me Mr. Ed. Their laughter fills the same air that once carried my pain, and I'm grateful for that. It feels like life gave the house a second chance at innocence. In the evenings, I sit by the window and let the golden light fall across the old photographs, Margaret smiling, Ava as a child, me standing behind them with sawdust on my clothes. We were never perfect, but we were real. That's the thing about truth. It doesn't need to shine. It just needs to stay. I think about all the fathers out there, the ones who gave everything and were forgotten, the ones who built worlds for others to inherit but never got a thank you. I want to tell them this: your silence matters. Your dignity matters. You don't have to raise your voice to remind the world what you built. The foundations speak for themselves. Ava once told me, you'll ruin it if you show up. And maybe in some way I did, but not out of anger, out of love. Because sometimes love doesn't protect by staying, it protects by leaving. And sometimes the quietest revenge is peace. Now when the night comes and the porch light hums softly above my head, I breathe in the scent of rain and roses. I think about how strange it is that a man can lose everything he thought defined him and still find something better in return himself. The truth is simple, but it took me a lifetime to learn. You cannot teach respect with words. You can only show it through silence. You cannot demand love from pride. You can only keep your peace when it's refused. And when your name is forgotten by those you built your life for, remember this: your worth isn't in their memory. It's in the integrity of your own story. So if one day Ava reads this, I hope she understands I never sold the house to punish her. I sold it to free myself from the version of love that hurt us both. And if that freedom taught her anything, then maybe in the end, I didn't lose a daughter. Maybe I helped her find herself. The sky outside darkens. The streetlights blink on one by one. Across the road, the Whitaker's windows glow warm and golden. Somewhere inside that light, I hear the echo of my own laughter. the hammering of a younger man building walls with love and calloused hands. I raise my coffee in a quiet toast to everything I've built, everything I've lost, and everything I've finally learned to let go of. And as the night settles over the town, I whisper the only truth that ever mattered, not for anyone to hear, but for the silence to carry. Respect can't be inherited. It must be earned. And peace once found is the only legacy worth leaving behind. The wind moves through the trees, gentle and forgiving. I close my eyes and listen. Somewhere far away, the world keeps turning. But here on this quiet porch, the story has finally ended, the way it was meant to, not in noise, but in peace.